All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Zoning Board of Appeals meeting on Thursday, November 10th. We're going to go ahead and get started. Let me start before I forget, because I always forget to do a roll call vote here. Mr. Kindermans?
Present.
Mr. Swaim?
Present.
Mr. Faia?
Present.
And Ms. A. Moore, present. And we are waiting. We're thinking Jim is going to join us, but we're not sure. Right. We still don't see him, right? Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and get started with our 7 p.m. Corey North application. Who is presenting this evening?
Hi. Good evening.
Hi.
Chris Coughlin. My address is 2134 Sevilla Way, Naples, Florida. And I'm.
Oh, sorry. Hold on one second. Theo, did you want to recuse yourself? Is that why you're?
I would like to recuse myself. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. Theo wants to... Go ahead.
Very good. Okay, my name again is Chris Clausen. I'm with the applicant, which is Corey North Road LLC. My address is 2134 Sevilla Way, Naples, Florida. And I have a short PowerPoint presentation I'd like to present to the board. Let me share my screen.
That's great.
Okay. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're here tonight for this special permit for a PRD for 48Y Fitchburg Turnpike. The commission had a site meeting recently, and I just wanted to give you an update. Since then, we've received the notice of intent from Concord Natural Resources. We also were in front of the Sudbury Conservation Commission for an RDA that had to do with extending the CMLP power line through some of their jurisdiction, and we did receive a negative determination from them. From the site visit, which I was not at, but with me tonight is my lawyer, Bill Henchy, and my civil engineer, Matt Leidner. They along with one of my partners, Chris Kennedy, joined the commission for the site visit. And from that site visit, there was some concerns expressed, and we think we've addressed them with some revisions. There was a focus on the location of the duplex. So we've been able to move that duplex further away from the ridge line, 15 feet. I have a plan I can show you. With that movement, we had to modify the duplex. One side of the duplex had a front loaded garage, and we had to make it a side loading garage, which allowed us to move the duplex further away from the ridge line. Doing that allowed us to adjust our grading all along the ridge line, so we're actually not touching a lot of the grades over there, which allowed us to save a whole bunch of trees. Our previous plan that was in front of the Natural Resources Commission had 34 trees being removed within the buffer zone. That now is reduced down to 13 trees. And those trees under their jurisdiction were 6 inches in diameter or larger. So it was quite an improvement. And my next screen shows you how, this is just a locus. Everybody knows where we're at. So this is what we've done, and I'll zoom in here for you. So this red line here was our previous limit of work line. The green line now is the new limit of work line. And all of these trees that are located here were trees that were previously in our previous design going to be removed. So those will all remain in place, and it extends all the way down to the bioretention area that we put into this design. And the red outline here was the previous location of the duplex. And you can see how we pulled that away from the ridge line here, closer to Rookery Lane. This was a front loading garage, so we had to change it to a side loading garage, which allowed us to pull that closer to the road. We heard the commission speak, and we think we've addressed your concerns here. I have a cross section to kind of show you through that duplex on what it looks like. And I haven't, there's one further cross section that I'm going to show you, but this cross section here, I'll zoom in on it real quick for you, is coming through the duplex. The dotted line here is where the duplex was located previously, and we pushed it closer, further away from the ridge line. This area here is the area where we're saving a bunch of trees, and that's what these trees depict. I did an overlay of this drawing here. Kind of shows you the before, which this was the before, what we had submitted previously to the ZBA, showing you where the duplex was and the trees that were beyond the limit of work. This top image is the image where now we've moved the duplex back, and you can see how these trees here are remaining. So those are the adjustments that we've made, and we believe we've heard you loud and clear, and we think we've addressed them. So that's my short presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you read the room correctly, at least with me on that one. So I appreciate the work done on that. Let's go through the board, see if they have any questions, and then we can talk a little bit more. Ravi, Tom.
Well, I think those are good and nice improvements. I think to save the trees eliminates some concern that some folks have expressed. So I find that to be a very positive.
Great.
Yeah, that's a nice change. You know, I think it was very helpful to go on the site visit. You know, I think we've been presented information very clearly and thoughtfully, and so I don't really have any other questions at this time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when we went out on the site visit, I'll speak for everyone, although we haven't talked about this together, that was our concern, was addressing neighbors' issues about the sight lines of that, the duplex in particular. It was something I was concerned about, and having walked the site, those changes I think I'm very happy with. I'm really glad you guys did that. The other, I was less concerned obviously about the site of the other buildings, given that they're down lower in under that ridge. I think it would be a little bit helpful in addressing our criteria here. Elizabeth, do you want to speak a little bit to the benefits of this PRD versus, you know, not necessarily versus a subdivision, but just what the benefits of this from your conversations with Delia and from Marcia? I think you probably can condense it down, what your thoughts are.
So I know the applicant's attorney did provide the board a letter going through a number of the benefits for the PRD. Some of the items in comparison as far as, let's say, a standard subdivision is the diversity of units. There would not be the smaller duplex unit. There would not be the in level of invasives removal for just a standard subdivision development, because that deals with just the roadway and the utilities. Each of the lots are handled separately. So there would not be that level of invasive removals. There would definitely not be the level of landscaping and the number of trees and vegetation and restoration that's been pulled together for this project. So those are definitely three of the main differences between this and, let's say, a standard subdivision.
The other thing, the energy, the all electric, can you speak to that a little bit? I know the planning board went through this.
So current for, let's say for a subdivision, that is not something that the planning board has the discretion to work with an applicant on. If the applicant wished to have natural gas come from the adjacent development down a subdivision, that is just part of the utilities that are being proposed under the subdivision rules and regs, and that there is no ability for the planning board to discuss that with an applicant. So during the process with this application with the planning board. The planning board discussed with the applicant specifically having an EV charging station in each of the garages, and additionally spoke with the applicant about the roof and the ability and area of rooftop solar that would be available. And I spoke with the energy coordinator at CMLP, and the area of roof areas, I believe, and Chris can correct me, it's somewhere between 700 and 1,000 square feet of roof area that would be primed for solar installation as well. So that was part of the planning board's conversation for this PRD.
That's correct, Elizabeth.
And the conversation, can that be incorporated into our conditions then under this PRD, or are we?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. There's another condition that Tom and Robbie, I don't know if we haven't talked about this yet, about the transportation. It's on page 9 of the planning board recommendation letter. So that there will be a shuttle to the MBTA commuter rail stations in Concord and Lincoln and local markets in place of worship. I just thought it was worth discussing what we thought about that.
So that was, to give you the context, that was also something that was discussed during the planning board's conversations with the applicant. There is an extensive transportation demand management program for the adjacent development. And part of the conversation with the planning board was making sure that the homeowners for these units would be able to utilize most of those TDM measures from the other project, which again, that was something in the discussions with the applicant and the planning board that you would not see with a standard subdivision. But that has been incorporated into the planning board's recommendation and as a recommended condition of approval.
Right. Okay. So that transportation program is already in place with the Sudbury development. Is that
correct?
So just letting 6 houses use.
Correct.
6 lots use. Okay. Tom?
Elizabeth, but I just note that and I suspect you did too, so we all have, I have read each of the letters submitted by interested parties. Mm-hmm. And to the extent that there were issues raised, I compared those concerns they raised against the report of the planning board that Elizabeth drafted on behalf of that board. And I'm satisfied that those concerns have been addressed by the various committees, be it Department of Public Works, Conservation Commission, et cetera, and that the planning board report addresses those various issues. So I just want, to the extent that any of the interested parties are listening tonight or otherwise, I want them to understand that, in fact, at least I, and again, you can speak for yourself, but I did review each of those pretty carefully and then went back and saw where the planning board in the report addressed those issues.
Thanks, Tom. And to that point, Elizabeth, do you want to address you had sent us a letter, which unfortunately
yes.
I don't have printed out.
Yep. So my apologies. A couple of weeks ago, at the previous meeting in October, the Board of Appeals specifically asked for input from the Public Works Director regarding the 6 septic systems. And a question was raised to me about the 6 septic systems. And I went back and noticed that letter, while my email says it got forwarded, I can't find where it got forwarded, and it did not make it to the board's website. So I did send that just within the last hour to the board. It has been posted, but I can, the Public Works Director did specifically provide his comments addressing the issue raised with the 6 septic systems. and the zone 2. And while the information provided for the proposed PRD does not clearly show Concord's zone 2 on the plan submitted, the septic system locations also appear to be located outside the zone 2 of the White Pond well. And he takes no acceptation to the project as proposed.
Yeah, I was going to say, did he mean exception?
I think so. But I will clarify, because I think he takes no exception, and spell check corrected it for him. And it goes on to as far as the findings for the groundwater discharge permit for the adjacent development. And all of the requests of both Concord Water and Sudbury Water District, the applicant was required to install a groundwater monitoring network to allow for pre and post development assessment of their systems. So I apologize for sending that, but board had specifically asked that, and he specifically addressed it, that he does not have issues and concerns with the 6 septic systems.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I might, Madam Chair,
Sure.
during the process of permitting the groundwater discharge permit for that wastewater treatment plant, we worked very closely with Mr. Cathcart. I mean, we recognized right up front that he might have concerns. We provided him with the draft groundwater study before we submitted to Mass DEP. He made recommendations as to groundwater monitoring and other things, which we incorporated into that report. So we worked with him closely and early on the permitting for that to make sure that there were no impact to the Concord wells.
Thank you. I think, again, Tom, I think you made an excellent point that, again, I'm speaking for myself, but also assuming I'm speaking for Robbie as well, that we did read everything very carefully, and we're trying to consider the balancing of these concerns versus the rights of the developer and what would be the best use of this land based on what zoning, based on zoning limitations. So with that, unless there's another question from the board, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. Nothing. All right.
I'll just say on the groundwater point, I do agree with you that was, I think, a valid concern that was raised, and I think we've seen, enough from the town that makes me comfortable with that particular point. I think when we get to our deliberations, I'll maybe speak a little more specifically to some of the other things we heard from the public.
Okay. That sounds great. All right, let me go ahead and open up to public. If you could just press the raise hand button, and we will call on you. Oh, sorry, Jeffrey Parker. If you could just say your name and address.
Hi, Jeffrey Parker, 315 Plainfield Road. First, Miss Elizabeth
Akers.
Yeah. Hi, Ms. Akers. You mentioned that the other units were lower down than the duplex. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that's right.
Wanna
someone clarify that?
Can I have one of you clarify that in terms of the ridge line?
Matt, can you address that on how the grading works?
Yes, sure. Matt Leidner, Civil Design Group, 21 High Street, North Andover, Massachusetts. Good evening, board members. So yes, the duplex unit is the highest unit of the 6 homes, the highest building of the 6 homes. They step downward from that unit as you work from west to east through the project. So yes, the duplex is the highest unit.
Okay, how much do they step down?
You want to answer that? How much they step down from the highest?
Yeah, so the amount they step down varies from unit to unit. So I think
it's like 1 or 2 feet, right?
Matt, I think if you go from the duplex elevation, basement elevation down to the last elevation, my recollection is the drop is from 160.5 down to just, I think, about 145, about 15 feet.
Right. So I want to be accurate here. So the duplex unit, right, 160.5 is the highest unit. The lowest unit as it steps down, and I'm talking top of foundation elevation, is 145.50.
Okay, but the units next to that duplex, what are they? The units
on the Sudbury, in the Sudbury development?
Ones that are on the ridge, what are their heights?
So the first single family home next to the duplex, Matt, what's that?
Through the chair,
yeah.
If I may.
Yeah, the one next to the duplex.
And,
yeah. So I will answer that question through the chair if I'm directed.
Yes, you please answer that because I'm going to respond as well to.
Yes. So the duplex 160.5, the first single family home, so the home next to the duplex building, 159.
Right.
So Mr. Parker, I just want to say, because I happen to really like your letter and I spent a lot of time reading it and thinking about it. And when my comment about it stepping down was really walking the land and seeing what the impact was going to be. My concern was really that duplex and how high up it was sited. We can talk about this more during deliberations, but I really did think a lot about the balance here of benefit versus, what would happen if we weren't to grant a PRD, which, and if the PRD really was a benefit. So I don't want you to think that I'm cavalierly saying, oh, it's much lower. I probably came across not.
Yeah, I understand. So how would you guys feel about doing a really short site walk from the other side, from the open space?
I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that question, answer other comments, and then I'll
okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? No, I do not see any. Am I missing something? All right, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. Ravi, you had said during deliberations you wanted to speak more on different points. And so if you want to start us off.
Yeah, I mean, do you mind if I talk for a little while?
Please.
Okay, because I wanted to kind of take a step back here and maybe start with, there's one sort of paradox here, which is, as I understand it, Sudbury has restricted the developer to building only 6 units on the Concord side of the line. And is that right? Maybe Bill can confirm. Okay.
Yes.
So, and so that leads into, when I look at the PRD bylaw, I agree with the planning board. We've checked all the boxes for 10.2.1 onward for what are the minimum requirements for a PRD. I think the planning board made a somewhat conclusory statement that they think that this proposal, that this project will be harmonious with the neighborhood. And then it just says, for the reasons set forth below, and the reason set forth below is just checking all the boxes. But before you get to the boxes, you have to check, the overall purpose of a PRD is provide for a mixture of diversity of housing types in the town at somewhat greater dwelling unit densities than is otherwise permitted. And the basic density is 6 here. So there is no greater density, which brings you back to that paradox, which is they're not allowed to build more than 6 units. And then, the second thing that I've noted multiple times in the planning board recommendation is they made the statement, this is not consistent with other PRDs that Concord has approved in the past. So stepping back, I look at this project and I think to myself, what makes this a PRD? And I have trouble getting there. And I think that's consistent with where we came out on the Center and Main PRD proposal, which we rejected because at the end of the day, that looked like a subdivision. It basically was a subdivision that they wanted to put more units in. And here I look at this and I see a subdivision, but for that one duplex that's in there. So I have trouble looking at this and saying, yeah, this is a PRD. You know, and then the second step of that is, okay, well, let's assume that we can call it a PRD. The harmony with the neighborhood development, I find differently than the planning board, because to me, the neighborhood is the large development of townhomes over the line in Sudbury. And all of a sudden you cross the road and you've got large single family homes, but for the one duplex, if you're going to be harmonious with that neighborhood, I would expect to see another street of townhomes. And to me, that would actually be an advantage to Concord in terms of there are a lot of people who want to live in Concord, can't afford the single family home, would love to have the opportunity to get into a townhome somewhere in Concord. So if this PRD with the 6-unit paradox came to me as a bunch of townhomes, I would have an easier time viewing it as a PRD, despite that density question. So then I go to the other benefits and advantages of the town that are cited in, thank you very much for summarizing, to the applicant for summarizing that in the letter. And on those points, I actually found that there were arguments in the public comment that cut the other way. And I sort of found those a little more convincing to me. You know, with the site restoration, yeah, okay, you're gonna put some vegetation in there, but are you really gonna leave a moonscape next to your townhome development in Sudbury? Probably not. Is anyone from Concord gonna see this revegetation? No, but they are gonna see, you know, to what Mr. Parker was saying, if you walked the view line from the other side, I think they still are gonna see these homes. So there is an impact to view. For the diversity of housing choices, you know, yes, we have the one duplex, but again, because this is in a way not really a PR, doesn't really fit as a PRD, it's hard to get that diversity when you have mostly single family homes. And yes, they've checked the minimum box that, you know, 80% can be the same type. But again, the step back and take a look at the picture, you know, I don't see diversity as a benefit here if it's not going to be some smaller homes available to people who want to live in Concord. The open space requirement, Mr. Parker's letter was actually very helpful in showing sort of a map that spoke to a question I'd asked at the last hearing, which was, you know, there's this conservation restriction, but how much of what's covered by the restriction is actually land that would end up being developed, because most of it is wetland. Either wetlands or a very steep slope within the buffer that I think would be very difficult to build on. And so, you know, it's not open space that anyone in Concord is really going to have access to. It's, you know, it's not open space that you can walk on. It's you know, a steep slope and wetlands that you can't walk through. So the next benefit, the energy efficiency and clean energy usage. You know, I'm not super impressed by what I've seen, and I've heard environmental concerns from the public on that. Same thing on the greenhouse gas emissions. So, you know, weighing those two sides up, I have trouble finding a true advantage here that gets me over the hump of why am I calling this a PRD in the first place, and why do I need to get it into that sort of box? So I have trouble getting there on this one.
Okay. I mean, excellently put. Very interesting, provocative points. Tom, let me let you respond before I think more. You go ahead first.
Well, there are interesting points made, but the fact that the bylaw and the planning board saw this as qualifying as a PRD is persuasive to me. The fact that yes, the planning board said this is not the typical PRD, but they then pointed out, notwithstanding that, they went ahead and said, hey, for the following reasons, we think this is an appropriate project for PRD treatment. And I'd rather have, I guess, the single family homes there than I would more of what we saw on the Sudbury side. And I also—
Tom, why is that? Because they're limited to 6. Do you prefer having the larger homes? If you're going to have 6 homes, you prefer having larger homes over 6 more modest homes?
Well, I don't think we should be in the business of indicating the size of the home. I'm not sure we have that authority. We have the authority where it's placed, setbacks, heights, things of that nature. But I don't think I'm in the business of designing the exterior of what it looks like.
No, but it speaks to diversity. But I would say it speaks to diversity of housing type, not say
of housing type. Agreed. But to that extent, they have met the minimum standard.
Right. Right. But I think the bylaw exists and gives the board some discretion, as well as giving us another layer of review after the planning board, because it's not, if you could just check the minimum boxes, why have the ZBA look at it, right? There's got to be some qualitative element to this where we consider all of these factors and the things that they're trying to get at. So I appreciate your presenting the kind of other view, which I see it as well.
I'm gonna go ahead and maybe get myself in trouble here, but Ravi, I think you've taken kind of a philosophical approach, and I'm gonna go ahead and take a very practical approach. And to which, Bill, I'm gonna address you. Clearly, it would be advantage. Why a PRD and not a subdivision? Let's put it to that. Why are you applying under the PRD provision?
Well, there's some history to that, but I guess the honest answer is that we had a serious disagreement with certain members of the planning board about a definitive plan, and we worked very hard to resolve that disagreement in a manner that was cooperative and which would provide some benefit to the town. And while we reserved all of our rights on the definitive plan, I want to point out, I even continued the public hearing after we had achieved a constructive approval because it was our intent to honor our word in that regard. We chose to submit to the jurisdiction of the planning board, strike that of the ZBA, for, I would say, several reasons. First of all, my clients are a partnership of 3 people. You've got to know Chris. You met Chris Kennedy on the site, and you haven't met the third partner, a gentleman by the name of Joe Hakem. I think it's fair to say that their point of view, collectively and individually, is to work with a community wherever possible and avoid fighting with communities, because at the end of the day, they have to work with the community, and it's just a better philosophy of going about permitting. That's certainly my own view, having, you guys don't know my background, but I served on town boards myself for decades, including a couple of stints as a select board member down here in my town on the Cape, and 12 years as the co-chair of our Conservation Commission. So, you have a group of people who very much prefer to work with the town. Now, as to and I agree, it's a philosophical question that that Mr. Fella is, I hope I didn't slaughter your name. I apologize.
You did, but it's fine. Yeah.
Sorry.
You gave it a try.
My apologies. But I have to say a couple of things. First of all, the bylaw has standards which an applicant must meet, and we have met them. That's the first observation I have to make, being an advocate for my client here for a second. Secondly, as to the open space and the wetland provisions, and I made mention of this in my correspondence, the board in the application of this section is supposed to consider protection of wetlands and scenic views over wetlands and wildlife habitat as a priority. So this has been sort of kicked around as though the protection of these wetlands as open space is a detriment. That's not what the bylaw says.
I don't think that's the point. I think the point is that we don't believe that you'd be able to build in them anyway. So that saying that you're protecting them is kind of a throwaway statement. Robbie, is that?
No, I think we have to weigh the advantages that are being presented and find that the PRD is sufficiently advantageous to the town. And so I'm looking at the advantages and I'm looking at what the public has said, which is all going the other way. And, you know, the visual qualities are specifically mentioned in the bylaws, and the public has expressed concern about, I'm walking along these beautiful wetlands on the trail and I don't want to see more houses up on the ridge. So, you know, I think we are weighing that, and I think we're weighing the advantage in practical terms of, is there going to be a concrete benefit to Concord from approving a PRD versus having a subdivision there? And, you know, if the subdivision was going to come and blow out the ridge and put a bunch of homes, you know, in the wetlands, that's a very different thing for us to weigh as an alternative than what I think we have to consider. What would the alternative be if there was a subdivision here? So, you know, my view of what the alternative would be right now is there would be another single family home and a couple of single family homes instead of the duplex there.
So if I might, because I was, respectfully, I was interrupted. I was asked a question, well, as a practical matter, you can't build there anyway, so what difference does it make? I don't agree with that at all. Because if you did a conventional subdivision, you would have some very large, very valuable estate-sized lots that would include those wetlands. And the Conservation Commission's job is to protect alterations to wetlands. And I can tell you, and I have considerable experience in this area, all of that stuff is buffer zones. And so any applicant owning a very large single family lot of a couple of acres who has the horsepower to purchase that kind of a property in Concord would certainly have the ability to make a demonstration that they could work within the buffer zone a heck of a lot closer to that ridge and over that ridge, because even the ridge is buffer zone, and would be able to get permits to put exactly the kinds of homes that the neighbors are complaining they don't want to see. They don't want to see things perched on that ridge. And so in the initial design, Matt worked very hard to get everything tucked behind that ridge so there would be no impacts. And as you can see, we sort of got the drift of the site visit. And I think it's fair to say that the three of you were generally satisfied as to the houses, except for the duplex that were, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, except for the duplex. So we went back and redesigned again as to the duplex. And the fact of the matter is, you're getting a duplex, you're getting single family homes that would be priced considerably below what the market would otherwise provide in this particular application. And you're getting everything else. You're getting a conservation restriction on wetlands that will be then preserved forever. You're getting a conservation restriction on wetlands near to the White Pond wells. You're getting conservation restriction on those slopes. And just the fact that there's slopes and you couldn't build on them doesn't mean you couldn't push a single family home a lot further towards that ridge and really dominate it. I mean, I live here on Cape Cod, and I can tell you every view worth taking on the Cape is taken as the result of people pushing their homes right to the edge of coastal banks and inland banks along ponds. And that's all doable under the Wetlands Act. And we're avoiding all of those kinds of impact in a manner of being responsive to what we've heard from the neighbors and what we've heard from the board. So
respectfully, I am gonna interrupt you because I would like to push on that a little bit. And this is not in an attempt to be antagonistic. I want the information all out there for all of us. We are three. I hear what you're saying about having understood what the three of us thought, but the three of us have not spoken. So I cannot tell you. I didn't know Robbie was going to come out of this. So, and I have different feelings of Robbie. So if I could, Elizabeth, could you please address the idea that if this were denied, that they could come in with a regular subdivision and build right up on that ridge line, encroaching, or however you want to say, on the wetland?
For a subdivision, the construction of the individual lots is not part of the planning board's purview. The planning board's purview would be just the construction of the roadway and the installation of the utilities within that 50-foot road right of way.
So then yeah, go ahead.
Each individual lot, based on where they wish to build, would have to go through the Natural Resources Commission and meet their requirements as far as the Wetlands Protection Act and the town's wetlands bylaw.
Okay.
So the town's wetland bylaw has a no disturb of 25, a no build of 50, and then there's the 100-foot buffer.
And the no, if I might, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
In the site, that no disturb is down at the bottom of the slope because the edge of wetlands is down at the bottom of the slope. The no build is 50 feet back from that. So that leaves the rest of the ridge as fair game. And as long as you can design, and I mean, I've written wetlands regulations. This is one of my primary areas of practice. As long as you can design a site design and appropriate erosion controls that will prevent alteration of that wetland itself and will prevent alteration of that 25-foot and 50-foot no build zone, you're in the buffer zone and you have the right to make those design choices and push them forward. And it wouldn't be one permit that would be under the purview of the ZBA. These would be individual applications to the Conservation Commission. And for better or for worse, this is simply how it goes. So
I think we've gotten to the meat of this, which is what's in it for you, what's in it for us, and what are we getting and what are you giving up and what are we giving up and what are you getting? Yes, Ravi.
I just want to make one point, which,
yeah, sure.
Because we want all the information out there, the height exemption standard is lower in a PRD application than it would be for anybody else who wants to build something that goes over 35 feet based on the pre-existing grade. So I think that
talk to that. Yep.
Yeah, no, that was an amendment that was made at town meeting 2 years ago. So the PRD bylaw does allow for a waiver to the height, and
correct.
And the height.
If we're not in a PRD, then we can provide a waiver, but I think we have to show no reasonable alternatives. Whereas in a PRD,
no, it's not unreasonable. It's substantial detriment to the neighborhood. It's the same standard.
So they amended
the no reasonable alternative. Well, let me look. I know this with the maximum.
Robbie, I had the same question about this, and I had gotten it flipped too, that it was harder outside of the PRD, but they did make an amendment. So Elizabeth, you could clarify, that would be great.
Yeah, can we find a vision, because
yes,
it's hard to look at a version of the bylaw that maybe has been amended.
So Elizabeth,
so the standard as far as granting relief to the definition of height, the board finds that the literal application of the requirement would be unreasonable because there are no reasonable alternatives available, and you are correct, and that the desired relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the neighborhood.
So I'm correct. And in the PRD, it's the substantial detriment standard, but I don't think the reasonable alternative verbiage is there in the PRD, right?
I don't believe so.
Right. So I mean,
yes, summarize,
Mr. Henchy looks like he wants to.
So
hold on, let Elizabeth finish up.
The height waiver outside of the PRD.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So,
yeah,
so I think as far as the height waiver, even if you were to apply that same standard, if you were to think about the site when you were out at the site, because this was a quarry, you would be talking about, you would be talking about building a house in the bottom of that pit where the rest of the, so when you think about it, to go 35 feet high, the degradation of the site because it was a quarry, I even if you were to have that standard, I don't think there is, there isn't a reasonable alternative without a height waiver given how the site was used.
Well, I don't want to prognosticate on how we would, find if somebody was before us under that standard. I was standing in the sand pit, and I wasn't, looking up a cliff or anything, right? I mean, you could build something down there. You wouldn't want to, because then you wouldn't be able to see over the ridge. But I don't think that we have to sit here today and say, oh, we'd certainly grant that waiver if it was outside of PRD. All I want to establish is that it's harder to get the height exemption if you're not in the context of a PRD.
Go ahead, Mr. Ritchie.
Thank you. I want to respond to precisely that point. We have a plan freeze here. I've been through this with town council, who agrees that we have a plan freeze here. And you might recall that the town amended its earth moving bylaw recently, but prior to that time, which is the time of our plan freeze, you were exempt to bring fill into a site, and you were exempt to bring fill from other portions of your site. And you can see from the site visit that there is abundant excess material all over that site. So to Mr. Fayez, and I'm sorry, I did it again, I'm certain. To your point, no, we would have the right to raise those grades because we're exempt from the earth moving bylaw by virtue of a plan freeze. So
you could raise the grade, but you couldn't build the height.
You couldn't build a house
without the waiver.
Right.
Well, and I also want to point out that as to the duplex, which seems to be the major source of concern here, that's in a cut. Grade doesn't have to go up there. That's already it's in a cut. So I don't know. I
again want to go at this. I am looking this much more in a practical sense, which is, and I know, Elizabeth, you hate it when I do this, but what would happen if we didn't grant this? I don't know a lot about what happened with the subdivision, but my understanding is that it could potentially end up in a lot of litigation between the applicant and the town, working through how that subdivision would pan out. Am I correct in stating that, Bill?
There would certainly be litigation unless the planning board approved the subdivision, and then we'd be right where this conversation would end up in any event. My view is the planning board is obligated to approve that subdivision as of right. It's one parcel, it has frontage on a public way. The frontage meets the minimum standards under the Concord zoning bylaw. I really don't want to litigate the subdivision issue here tonight.
I don't want to litigate it either. I'm just putting out there in full transparency what's on the table here, because it's not nothing. We're a PRD. There are other things to consider. Tom, you've been town council. I mean, you can speak to this if you want, but I think it's important for us to be realistic about what could be there and what the consequences are of not doing this. Is it my favorite thing in the world? This plan? No. Would I like to not see that duplex up in the ridge and nothing up on the ridge? Absolutely. I would love to, but I'm not sure that's realistic I'm not sure it's wise, let me put it that way, for us to dismiss this out of hand if there's a way to get there, which, as we're talking about, Robbie, you don't even think necessarily there's a way to get there under the PRD bylaw.
I think there's a way. Am I there? No.
Well, what about to my point where, okay, so we turn this down, the subdivision becomes this whole thing, and that's the reality of it. I mean, we can pretend it's not, but it is. So
yeah.
And then we're at then there's animosity on both sides, and at this point, thinking about it and looking at it, I think there are some real benefits to the fact that the applicant is working with the town and giving some things that I think that they will be less likely to give in a different situation. That's my
right. And I think we need to really flesh that out. And that's, I think that's why we're having this deliberation.
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah.
I apologize, Tom. I kind of cut you off a little bit earlier as well. I didn't know if you had further.
Well, I'm used to it. I can live with that. The reason I understand what you're saying, but given the location of this site, there are two aspects to it that for me leads me to continue to want to favor the application. And one, you've got that humongous project across the way in Sudbury. And so to whatever you build on the Concord side is a interesting animal, because those folks, whatever you end up with, PRD or the subdivision, that's an interesting sales project because they got that huge complex right in their backyard or front yard, as the case may be. Secondly, so I think that's not so easy to accommodate. Secondly, the fact that they've taken what appeared to be a pretty sorry looking site with the pit, etc. They've identified they're going to save now a lot of the trees. They've moved some of at least the duplex, the other houses, the house, I guess, 2 through 5. I do not find offensive in the context of reaching the ridge or overlooking the ridge. They're not on the top of the ridge. And so that the concerns raised by a number of people about water flows, septic flows, I find have been adequately answered, number one. I'm not convinced that the trails, which are not going to be in any of the areas that we're talking about, because the Conservation Commission doesn't want them. And so there won't be any. So I'm not personally persuaded by that argument by those folks who say, well, you're going to hurt our view coming from the trails that are somewhere out there. So for me, this project is something's going to go in there. And I agree with Elizabeth that given what the conditions that would be put onto this project, the conservation restrictions that would have to go along with it, the recommendations of the various committees saying, yes, these proposals meet the standards, I find that persuasive. So that's where I come from.
Right. I mean, Ravi, I've struggled with pretty much everything that you're saying. And Elizabeth, you can talk to us a little bit, because I mentioned to you, Elizabeth, so what, the same point Ravi made, that, oh, great, you're going to plant things, but you're not going to leave a bare site for people in their houses anyway. You're going to do something there. And you responded that you had spoken with Delia and that there was a more significant amount of restoration being done than would be if it were just someone's house that they were trying to make look good, for example.
Correct. The planting plan is significant and is not one that would be required for the subdivision. And because each individual lot would come in as an individual application only, if they were to be in the buffer zone, the overall landscaping that would be required would not be at the level that the current landscaping plan shows.
So in a way, Ravi, I guess I'll say what I said again, which is that it's better to be working together. I seeing what's happened on the Sudbury side, I guess am happy that the Concord has a little bit of say in what happens. That's not meant to be a blow at you guys, but I'm happy that we have some say and that we can push for some things that we would like. I'm not sure that's going to happen otherwise. And is it my being an idealist? No. Could I say, oh, it'd be great to have nothing there? Yeah, but that's not the case. So.
Right. But I think we would have control through the height exemption over the visual impacts. And when you look at the other advantages, I'm not saying there's zero, but
and I have to say, it would be, no one's gonna like that I say this, but it would be helpful to have Delia kind of explain why this is such a big deal, or, that why she came to this planting plan, what she thinks about the wetland, because that is an issue that we're talking about. I guess my point is, Ravi, this obviously needs to be a unanimous vote. And if Ravi, if you're struggling with this, I think there might be more information that Delia, you, Elizabeth, and Marcia can probably give to us that would maybe enlighten us a little bit more and maybe make you more comfortable. Does that make sense? Even though, Bill, you're not going to like that I said that, but.
Nope, I can definitely touch base with her on Monday and have her, specifically address that in a comment letter to the board.
Ravi, tell me what further information, and you know, I'm not saying you're going to change your mind, but what information would help you to either dig in further or to, you know.
So the other piece of information that I can also get for the board to specifically address as far as the height waiver is how that gets interpreted. You know, it's been interpreted based on the you know, the existing grade, and that assumption is, you know, what it is right now, when that was not the existing grade before it became a gravel pit. So that is additional information I can probably get town council to weigh in on, if that would be helpful.
Ravi, you look skeptical.
You know, these are not modest homes. You know, we're talking about having access to a shuttle bus, but we're putting 3-car garages on these and 2-car garages on each side of the duplex. You know, it's a tall house. If you look at the elevation.
I can speak to that as well, because that was also brought up during the planning board's meeting. Given the conservation restriction, and the planning board did discuss, you know, the 3-car garages, there would not be the ability for those property owners to build additional accessory structures on those lots. And so basically the third garage becomes your storage space for equipment and bikes and lawnmowers and everything.
I mean, listen, I don't think that we're trying to fool anyone, and that this is a huge diversity of housing. And
that was also discussed by the planning board.
Go ahead.
And with the so it is also challenging, and this is something that the planning board discussed, and I believe this board discussed with the Concord culinary cottages. When you have a project, given the expense for development in the community, when you have a project that's 4 or 6 units, that diversity of units becomes more challenging when you're talking about a single family home versus a duplex or a triplex. And the planning boards, in conversations, you know, especially with Concord culinary cottages, is as Elizabeth said earlier, that balance between you know, a standard subdivision and you know, the cost to construct. And then when you get into the PRD, you have all these other items, whether it's, you know, a duplex or, you know, the EV charging, additional landscaping, all the other, you know, elements that go into that, and finding a balance between, you know, the requirements in the zoning bylaw and the findings that the board has to make, and you know, a property owner's right to have some expectation for development. So the planning board did discuss that diversity as well, and because it was initially thought, well, what about you know, 2 duplexes and only 2 single family dwellings, and then you know, it got into, you know, that trying to find that balance, because I think Ravi, to your initial point, the town and the applicant have been put into this paradox of, you know, only 6 dwelling units.
That's what I started with, right?
And so I think that's what also makes this project challenging, and that was part of the planning board's, you know, discussion of it. You know, it isn't your standard, you know, PRD, and it's not to any fault of the applicant or or the town or the bylaw itself. But I can definitely touch base with Delia and have her write something up as far as how she perceives the benefits of the project.
And where I am is the bylaw tells me the board has to find that it's sufficiently advantageous to depart from the regular standards applicable to this district. And right now I have a letter from the applicant and I have a bunch of public letters as well saying different things. And it's hard for me to make that finding on that record that's in front of me. So if Delia can come through with something that
Robbie, I totally appreciate your sorry, go ahead. I appreciate it, and I'm pushing you a little bit into okay, that's all nice. Let's have the legal argument 20 different ways. We're all lawyers. We can argue it one way, we can argue it the other way. What is the reality of the site? So I think we should listen to Delia and think about that, as opposed to pretending that that's not a really real aspect of what's going on here.
And the comments that I've made tonight, if it's helpful, I can try and put that also into a memo for the board.
No, I think it was clear what you said, and I understand it.
Robbie, I'm sorry. Robbie, let me ask you one question. If we don't grant this, are you concerned that the pit, as we saw it, will kind of just stay there forever?
I'm not concerned about that, and I'm not concerned about it in two ways. Number one, as I mentioned, the folks in Sudbury aren't going to want to look at that who live in their townhomes. And number two, they're the only people that can see it, right? And I heard from the public that they actually think there's wildlife in there. This is why maybe Delia could help with specifying why the revegetation is an advantage. Because I don't have anybody's word but the applicants on that.
So pushing Tom's question further, then are you worried that a subdivision would get us into something that we would be a lot worse than this?
I don't think it would. I think we lose the duplex, which I would be sad about because that's two smaller homes, right? But other than that, I'm not sure I see a material detriment there.
To me, it's the question of how much you could actually build up and how much you could actually cut down. And that's a very hard thing to hypothesize about unless we actually had a plan or we actually went to town council and said, hey, would they be able, where would we stand under the wetlands regs? And I don't think we can go down that route completely.
Right. I don't think we can. I think we don't have a counterfactual that is in front of us. But I do have large single family homes that have, that are tall going on these lots.
So you've now been at this an hour. You do have quite a few other things. So let me touch base with Delia on Monday and have her address those points that Robbie has made in a memo, and then I will, as far as the questions between the PRD and the subdivision, I can provide information to the board on that as well.
That would be great.
And I don't know if the applicant has anything to say about the house design, whether it has to be that tall. But that's, if looking at things you could do here, right, on the design without drastically changing what's in front of us. I do appreciate that the duplex was moved. I think that's great. I didn't know if there was anything else, any other ideas that are out there.
If you're, I'm not know where your mindset is on the height of the homes, but the homes are not extra tall. They're a typical colonial. I mean, we could cut the top floor off, but then that's a totally different product. And
yeah, what I think is, I mean, I'm assuming that the applicant is going to is going to want us to go ahead and continue this because you see where it's headed if we vote on it. I think that would give us all time to kind of go back and think. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you. The answer to your question is, excuse me, is yes. I was going to make that point. We're happy to, I mean, we're not only happy, we're confident that the information we submitted will help you to clarify this point, which I understand is central. But I gotta say one thing. You know, we've submitted a ton of detailed factual information. Everything that is from the other side that I've seen, at least, is anecdotal. I don't see an engineer submitting comments. I don't see anybody pointing to a violation of the standards in the zoning bylaw. I hear a whole bunch of comments that basically say, we don't like it. And it seems to me that really isn't a basis for decision. Now, that said, I don't want to debate it. I don't want to debate it because I got the board's temperature loud and clear. And I really respect that you're kicking around what is obviously a complicated question for you guys and are considering the larger picture. So I think a continuance makes sense. I think Elizabeth's suggestions to get additional information makes sense. We certainly assent to a continuance to do that. Frankly, it's probably better we stop talking in circles. I think we all know where we are. And
I think we all get it. And I think to your point, it is a discretionary permit, and whether we got to litigating whether we're being arbitrary and capricious, I think we are confident in how, I think Robbie's confident in his points and how they stand under the bylaw. So I would say, let's not discuss it anymore. Let's do a continuance. Let's get some more information and see if we can get on the same page, which it is our goal to try to get something done here and not just talk around it forever. So with that, oh, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
I move that we continue this until the next hearing date, being the application of for 48Y Fitchburg Turnpike until the whenever the next meeting is.
All right. Wait, when is it and what time?
So December 8th, and I believe you can continue it to 7 unless Haley says otherwise.
No, we can continue it to 7. We have other items, but they can come later.
Chris, I don't know how you feel about this. I will not be available December 8th. I got a medical procedure scheduled that day. I won't be able to do it.
So the one is there only one meeting a month?
Correct.
Right.
The next one after that, I believe, is January 12th, but I don't have, it's usually the second Thursday of the month.
What time is that? 7 o'clock?
Yep.
All right. Well, I'm on trial in the land court that day, but I'll make it work.
Well, we have to, is that a set time? Because we have to continue to a date certain, right? So are we absolutely? Yes. So that's January.
Haley, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's January 12th.
I don't have that schedule currently available. I know it was created, but
so just give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, that's fine.
You guys wouldn't want a special meeting on Christmas Eve just for us?
Obviously, we'd all love that. We've all been associates. I think we've all been in that situation, having to work hours like that, right?
I don't want to put you in that position.
No.
January 12th.
January 12th, 7 p.m.
Chris?
Okay. Do I have a second?
Before I second, I did see that Mr. Parker has hand raised. I don't know if you want to wait till.
Yeah, I do want to wait. I see your hand, but I think I think better we don't discuss anymore. I think come to an end for the evening. Second, do I get a second from you, Mr.?
I second, yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Swaim.
Yes.
Mr. Faya.
Yes.
Ms. Akers-Moore, yes. We will see you in January. Thanks for your time.
Good evening.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's move ahead. 7:05. Michael Carucci. Hi, Elise.
Yes, hi, how are you doing?
I'm sure you're enjoying this, right?
Yes. So my name is Elise Stone. I'm here representing the owners, my clients, Michael Carucci and Maris Marrero.
Sorry, before you do this, I'm sorry, Jim, I see you and we did not do a roll call vote with you. So I assume I need to say, Mr. Smith, you're here. Oops.
I'm here, yes, I'm here.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
And I'm
That's
back.
okay.
Oh,
Anyway,
sorry, Mr. Kindermans is back. Great.
Oh, sorry. We all set? Okay,
Yeah,
sorry. So I'm here about 309 Garfield Road. We were here a couple months ago, and at that point we had been in front of the Historic Commission and had a favorable outcome there. And we came in front of you, and it was decided at that meeting that we go in front of the Select Board. So we did maybe 3 weeks ago get in front of the Select Board, and they did pass this request for the garage with the finished space above it.
So we don't have anything. Did you submit that? Because we have nothing that says that. We don't have anything from the Select Board. We have nothing.
Oh, you have nothing from the Select Board? I mean, I guess I'd have to call. I thought they would just send something directly down. Haley, is there anything? Do you know?
I didn't receive anything from the Select Board.
Okay, so we can definitely get that. I mean, it was a very straightforward meeting. We had written a letter. They, we went through the whole presentation. They looked over the, the written agreement between, was the historic preservation plan for the house, the Thomas Mott Shaw Estate, which I think I submitted with this application as well. So we went through all that, and it was a unanimous vote in favor of the project. So then we resubmitted our application to the zoning board, and that's why we're here tonight. So I can go through it quickly. So 309 was originally part of 317 Garfield Road, and that is the Thomas Mott Shaw Estate. And this preservation plan was drawn up because the town, it was kind of a two-way thing. The town wanted this house preserved because as it stands, we have a year, someone could buy that house, hold it for a year and then demolish it. So the town kind of came up with a plan, but allowed the carriage house to be sold. So the carriage house is what the Michael and Maricela bought. And it is also consists of a lot that is 21,886 square feet. So it's quite a large lot. And it is cut kind of in the middle by an access road. The road is for, their house, and also there are 3 houses that are beyond it. And really the zoning board, why we're coming in front of you is right now the current carriage house sits only 8.7 feet from this road. And the requirement in this residence is 40 feet. So that, when they created this lot, that became, it was non-conforming. So the structure is non-conforming with that setback. So in this historic preservation plan and agreement, and like I said, we cited this as the Select Board, it was agreed that you were, these new owners of this carriage house could put a outbuilding, a garage, a shed on the property. And so when we looked at where to place this, there really was only one place to place it, which is kind of across the street from the existing carriage house. It kind of goes across from where their driveway goes in. Directly across would be this carriage house. It's kind of built into the side of the hill there. There's also a septic issue, the whole septic system is right there as well. So, oh yeah, there it is there. So you're kind of able to see the road cutting through the carriage house and then the proposed garage directly across from that existing driveway. You see where the septic sits. And the septic sits. And so we had distances to maintain and all that. So this new proposed garage sits 9 feet from the driveway. And so we're not making the non-conformity worse. So right now it's at 8.7, we're requesting 9 feet. So that's one of the reasons we're here. The second reason is because it is a non-conforming structure, by right, we could only add 50% of the existing square footage. So the existing square footage is 1,380 square feet. So if we added 50% of that, we would be allowed to have a total of 2,070. We are adding, our new total will be 2,597. So we are adding 527 square feet over that allowable 50%. So those are the two, two reasons why we're before you today.
Thank you. Okay, I mean, I think I mentioned to you that, Jim, I can't remember, were you on the board when we did this? Jim, you
Yes,
there?
I was. Yep,
All right.
I was.
I mean,
sorry.
Okay, I will say, do I think it's in the spirit of things to buy a carriage house and then essentially build another house-sized structure on this historic property? And I mean, I don't, but I also think it's not really within our purview. And if the select board, while it rubs me the wrong way, I don't think there's anything we can do about it if the select board says that it's okay. So that's where I am, but I also don't have anything that says the select board says it's okay. So I don't know how you guys want to proceed on that. And we still need to make a finding in terms of the character of the neighborhood, all that.
And also, I just, want to reiterate that the Historic Commission, we went in front of them as well. And they looked at everything, they looked at the architecture and they approved it as well. And so they were looking at it with the character of the house and the neighborhood.
Excuse me.
It's a subjective opinion. I'm very well aware of that. I'm just saying it's subjective. And as someone who was in the deliberations when we were working on it, that's how I feel. But other comments?
Can I ask what Elise, what day did you go to the select board?
Let me see, I could probably get the date here. Let me just look. We were there on the 17th of October.
Okay. I was just seeing if they had minutes posted yet, and they don't.
Okay, comments from the board.
I guess I'll have a couple of questions or a comment too. I'm not really so worried about the garage. I'll take the opposite view, primarily because I think that the agreement talked about garages and outbuildings and all sorts of other things, and
not all sorts of other things, but yeah, I talked about outbuildings.
Outbuildings and garages, and I think
this isn't really an out. I mean, this is really a big building with an office and point taken. But go ahead.
Well, in any event, I mean, I think that it's a matter of, perhaps it's a matter of degree. I do think that the idea of this was the notion that you wouldn't want somebody necessarily adding to the space of this house, which obviously is historic, or adding a garage adjacent to the house, which is, of course, would change the character of that. So I guess I will say that I think that certainly there was an expectation in my mind that someday they might build a garage there someplace. And, and if so, that was probably within the spirit of that. And then the question is, I think, you've asked it right, Elizabeth, as to whether or not it's a garage or in a whole nother building. My second question, I guess I just want to ask a point of information here. Usually when we are dealing with a situation where we're saying the nonconformity is not a greater nonconformity that already exists, we're talking about a situation in which there is an add-on to a house. You're adding onto the back of it, you're adding onto the something. So this is an entirely new building, which is also located within 9 feet of this. So I'm just trying to, maybe I'll direct this to Elizabeth, Elizabeth Hughes, as to whether or not, something in that we're running into some issues here with respect to interpretation of kind of standard traditions when we're talking about a second building, which is also not across the street too. I mean, it's sort of like you could imagine that it's a different situation. I'm not going to say it's better or worse. I think it's just a different situation. And then the third question I have is that we do have a letter from neighbors that raised both some questions and issues, looking for some additional information, and clearly indicating a hope that they could get the information and then reconcile whatever concerns they had with their neighbor. And I just nothing in the presentation so far has gone to the question about whether there has been contact, hasn't been contact, and maybe those people are here tonight. I'm not sure I'm necessarily seeing them on the screen, but I don't have the whole view. So
do you want to start by having Elizabeth answer that question?
That is definitely not a question that I can answer, and that you would have to request town council's assistance on. And I believe it's to your point, Jim, when you're looking at a non-conforming structure as far as setbacks and somebody coming in under section 713, the extension of a non-conforming structure, and how this plays in because it's a separate structure across the roadway. Is that correct?
Well, that's the question. Yes. I'm asking. Yeah.
That is definitely.
I mean, I grant that it's not. I grant that it's not more non-conforming, but it just that it's not closer than 8.7 feet from the roadway. It just strikes me as odd that we're applying, whatever the closest other building was is somehow being applied to that issue. And I know that we have different requirements for when, in town, we have different requirements for when garages, which are not part of the building, how close they can be to property lines, right? I mean, isn't there a separate setback requirement for garage and like the Residence B areas and like around Central Street and that kind of area, it seems like.
You're speaking about a detached garage?
Yes.
Yeah, so a detached garage has to meet the setback requirements unless it is sited behind the rearmost portion of the house. Then it can be as close as 5 feet to the property line.
All right, okay.
Yeah, so just to answer or to just talk about one point, this was, we work closely with Ray. Now he has left. He was the building inspector that recently retired. And, he looked at this, we looked at this site and where we placed the garage really between the septic and the setbacks. And also to your point, Jim, not wanting to have it near the existing structure to kind of take away from the architecture of the existing. So this is the one area for this structure to possibly go on the entire site. And, Ray wasn't at all bothered by the fact that it was a separate, just because there are so many houses in Concord that have these separate, barn-like structures of something. Yep. The size of this is 24 by 24 with 4 feet extra for the stairs that go upstairs. 24 by 24.
We'll pull up a plan.
Yeah,
would that be okay?
If we pull up the plan, exactly. And just to show you, so the roof pitch is exactly the same as the roof pitch of the house, similar. And so regardless of whether there was a room or not, we would have the same. There's only a dormer on one side, which, is really only would be affected by the 3 houses, people driving backwards. I mean.
So while we're pulling it, okay, sorry, it's already up.
So again, how many square feet is the entire thing?
So the entire thing is, it's like 1,200 square feet.
On both floors?
Both floors, yeah, both floors.
1,200 square feet on each floor, or 1,200 square feet?
No, just on one floor. It's a 24 by 24 garage, and then the extra, if you put the plans down, you can see the extra 4 feet that comes out for the stairs that you see on the right side elevation.
Right, but when you go upstairs, how big is that floor upstairs? That I think was
1,200 square
feet. Maybe go
Okay.
to the floor plan. I thought I had them. So the second floor is 525 square feet. The first floor with the garage and the stairs. So I'm sorry, it's 24 by 26 is 692 square feet.
Okay, so
Those
1,200 square feet total.
Yeah, total.
Elizabeth, what were the numbers that we were given? Because I thought I saw 2,000 something.
Yeah, so initially when the application came in and the agenda was done, the calculation that we used was taken from the wrong spot, and from the gross floor area worksheet, and so it was wrong. The proposed square footage for this structure, both the garage and second floor, is 1,217 square feet.
I think the 2,000 was including the existing house, Elizabeth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
No, I think there were actually, I think Elizabeth, what you're saying is there was an actual error. There was something that said there was an addition that was going to be 2,000 something, which, you know, is a big difference, obviously.
Yeah, half.
Yeah, that would be the amount, right?
Yeah, about half. Yeah.
See, Elizabeth, we've already caused the applicant to knock the size of the house garage down by 50.
Look at, we did it. We did it. Well, you can see that a 2,600 square, whatever it is, it's different than an outbuilding, isn't it? So
no, for sure. Yes, 1,200 square feet is different, but
it's different. Granting this would say nothing else can be built. Although, Jim, I think your point is still valid about the nonconformity here.
I just think it's I mean, I haven't had my question answered about whether or not there's been any contact with the neighbors and whether the neighbors are satisfied or not. And if they haven't come tonight, that's another issue, but they put in a letter. But setting that aside, I would just simply say that it seems to me that the deal with the town, the signed agreement, which the select board hopefully took a look at when they approved this, assuming that we can find that approval, you know, I think it did permit a garage, an outbuilding, and I do think that 1,200 square feet here is probably gets us a lot closer to garage and outbuilding than larger structure. I think that I have asked a technical question about the nonconformity because I want to know how we should be. Want to think about how we phrase our statement here, because this is sort of an odd situation because it's also a road that bisects a property, and that's a different kind of, you know, thing too, and a rather private road that really is a dead end and accesses 3 other houses or 2 other houses or something like that, and so I can't get myself too worried about the nonconformity issue here either. And so that, in my mind, just leaves me to the question of, do we have a dispute with the neighbor or don't we? And if we do still have a dispute, because the record is that we just have the letter from the neighbor, then I think we ought to discuss it. And if there's been an update on that letter from the neighbor, I'd like to understand that as well.
Okay, so I would propose that we see if, when I open public comment, the neighbor is here, and then take it from there.
And I can, is Michael still, I don't see, is the owner still on? Because I know the owner was trying to get in touch with him, with whoever wrote that letter. But do you see him on? I don't see him on mine.
All right, let's keep going with board comment, and then I'll go ahead and open to public comment.
He is on. Oh
yeah.
Okay,
he is on.
Go ahead if you want to answer Jim's question.
Michael.
Yeah, we have 3 neighbors. I approached all 3 of them, left messages if there are any issues, and one immediately to the right had no issue. One further down the road, I think the letter came from a couple at the very, very end who won't even see this garage. And I'm not so sure.
It came from Jacob and Catherine Spencer.
I think that's the very last house at the end. And I have not heard from them, no.
Okay, thank you. Robbie, Tom. Oh, Theo, I already forgot about you, sorry. What happens when you recuse yourself?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
No, nor I.
Theo.
I think Jim had the same question I had about the non-conformity and being a totally separate
Theo,
structure.
I can barely hear you.
Sorry, hopefully this is a bit better. It's Jim asked my question about the non-conformity being a totally being a second structure. So I think that's been addressed.
Okay. I'm not sure it's been addressed, or we still
addressed, or at
still
least,
have to address it somehow.
Yeah.
All right, let me go ahead and open to public comment. Anything? All right. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. Listen, I feel a lot better with it being 1,200 square feet. So, you know, it being 2,000 something wasn't, you know, it's a lot better to me. However, my question still remains, can we say it can't be built on further, that this is as big as this thing can get?
This is a special permit, so yes, definitely.
So I'm asking my board members that too, I guess, when we go for conditions here.
I think it couldn't be anyway, Elizabeth, is what you're saying, right? If we grant a special permit for this to be 1,200 and some square feet and to do this kind of thing, if they came out and built an 1,800 square foot thing, I don't think that matches the
correct.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Okay.
There's actually also no place on site that it would fit.
Yeah, well.
Okay. So going to Jim, your point, do you want to take a stab at how you would deal with the nonconformity, or?
I think that I would put the nonconformity in the context of the fact that this is a road that bisects the property. It's a road that bisects the property, and that in the special situation of the road that bisects the property, and given the fact that the garage is no closer to that road than the house is to the road, I think I'd be comfortable with a finding that it doesn't increase the nonconformity. But I think I just want to put that condition in, that road condition in there, because I think otherwise it opens us up for a situation where I don't know what could happen in other situations. You know, the kind of idea that you're sort of sitting there with you have a house and you have a long frontage and you kind of be able to put a whole garage on it, and it's I just don't want to get into that. So I think I'm happy to do this motion, but I think if we can tie it to the special circumstance of the road.
Elizabeth,
so I think some of the other comments that the board made in relationship to the findings that you, as far as the special permit and when you grant the special permit, those findings can incorporate some of the other comments, specifically, not just the road bisecting, but the shape of these lots, the historic nature of the home, and not wanting to see an addition to the home or a structure directly next to the home. I think those can also be added into some of the findings for the special permit that help make this more distinct from other things that could possibly come down the road.
Agreed. Particularly the historic part, I would agree with is that the whole idea of this is I mean, it's clearly documented as a historic issue that everyone's trying to preserve. So I think that's probably very helpful.
How do we deal with the select board approval, which?
So that can be written condition that prior to any site work or issuance of a building permit, we received, either written letter from the town manager or the select board authorizing the vote, or stating that they did approve the construction.
The vote. Yeah,
that's fine. I've got no issue with that. Jim, if you want to take a stab at the motion, who's voting on this? Jim and Tom, Rob, but who votes on this? Oh,
Jim and Theo.
Theo, I keep forgetting. Sorry. Don't take it personally.
So I would move we grant a special permit under sections 7.1.3, 7.1.5, 11.6, 11.7 of the zoning bylaw to Michael Carucci to construct a 1,217 square foot 2-car garage, including a 2nd-story addition at 309 Garfield Road. And in making and in granting the permit, we recognize that first, this is a historic property subject to a special agreement with the town of Concord, and our approval is conditional upon prior to, I guess, the issuance of a building permit, probably receiving satisfaction or receiving confirmation of approval by the select board. Secondly, that because of the historic nature of the property and the previous agreement, that we recognize that having the garage sited across the road and separated from the house is an important part of the historic aspects of the house, and that the nature of the requirements for septic systems or so forth, where the septic system is and where the road is that the garage is going to be it has to be 9 feet away from the road rather than the 40 feet. And then given the fact that this is a road that bisects the property, there are only 3 additional houses on the road, and the historic nature of it, that we think that the lack of conformity with the setback for the garage is appropriate under these circumstances.
Jim, I have a question. Do you reference the October date that we got the approval that you don't have in your possession now? So it's really clear the actual meeting and the date of the meeting that was approved.
I don't
know you want it.
Yeah, no, I don't think the actual date needs to be in there. If the condition is just that there be some letter or proof of the select board's approval. I don't think the date that you went is significant.
I will second that fantastic motion.
Wow, I heard a voice. Who was that, Theo? I haven't heard that in a while. All right, all in favor, Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Kindermans?
Aye.
Ms. Akers-Moore? Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, 7:10, Concord Academy. I'm going to be honest. I was under the impression, Elizabeth, that this was going to be continued.
It is.
Oh, because I see Tom and a bunch of DSK, and well, I'll let you speak for yourself, Tom, or Don, one of you.
Well, Elizabeth can also guide us.
All right. Who is presenting?
Don.
So I'll take this on. I'm Don Kingman, Concord Academy, 166 Main Street, Concord. And what we'd like to do is try to give you an overview of what we're calling the West Campus project, which is centered on a new Centennial Arts Center Performing Arts building. And we want to give you an update on the regulatory areas of where we are, and then talk about 3 areas we're looking for some guidance from this group. And I just wonder if there's an ability for us to be able to project something on the screen.
Yeah. So to your
site plan?
Yes, definitely you can. To your point, Elizabeth, Talking with the applicant, they are just going to give give a presentation, an overview of the project fairly quickly, and then not get into a really in-depth conversation, because this was continued from the planning board from Tuesday night to 2 weeks out. So the board does not have the planning board's recommendation. But I think the applicant is just going to go through and give a quick
we'll
presentation.
Take it as an introduction then to the project. That's helpful. All right, and yes, you can share your screen somehow.
Courtney is going to be driving for us.
Right,
Looks like she started. There we go.
So what we're looking at right now is a plan showing the Concord Academy campus. Main Street is in the lower third of this diagram. And to the right is the eastern side of our campus. To the left would be our western side. This is existing conditions as we speak. The area we're looking at is almost dead center. And Courtney can highlight that. It's kind of the West Campus area, and it would be taken from the chapel all the way over to the western edge of our property line. What we're proposing to do would be the next screen, Courtney, is, as many of you know, we're a landlocked campus hemmed in by Main Street on one side, the Sudbury River on the other. And so we're trying to use our space as effectively as possible. And what we're proposing to do is take this western edge of campus that is predominantly a large asphalt area and turn it more into a green space. The centerpiece of what we're trying to do is a new Centennial Arts Center, a new performing arts building, associated parking. And with that, we want to move our western access point about 100 yards to the west, where it's located at 207 Main Street right now, but move it further down the street to provide better vehicle access to the campus. When we do this, we have to move 2 buildings that currently exist almost within the footprint of that new Centennial Arts Center building. The first one is 220 Main Street, and we're going to pick the building up literally and move it over onto a new foundation here in the western edge of campus. The other building we have is Ives, which is a 1-bedroom apartment, and that's located currently at the top of the senior steps, which is right by the Academy Garden. From a greening perspective, what we're trying to do here is the Centennial Arts Center building will be no fossil fuels at all, trying to invest as much as we can into a robust insulation level of the building envelope. Other environmental issues that we're looking at is to take a playing field, and that's the upper field, if you will, that we don't need any longer. It's our worst topographical field, and turn that into a pollinator meadow. Reimagine our core part of our campus right in front of the chapel, which is our Academy Garden. It historically was part of some of the houses on Main Street. And over the past 50, 60 years, there's a series of arborvitae hedges that have grown extremely high. And what they do is, in effect, is wall off this space, and we want to open this up. We're also looking to create a new west lawn that would front the Centennial Arts Center building. And then as we move those 2 buildings over to the west, we want to create an Academy Village Commons right in that area. And this is the high altitude overview. I want to talk a little bit more about regulatory. We've gone through Historic District. We received approval from that board on this. We are in the process of going through the NRC, which I believe impacts this group a little bit relative to the calculations on the floodplain. We expect to have that decision in the next week or 2, and it's all positive there. And then, as Elizabeth said, we're in the planning board phase at the moment. We have met with our neighbors. There's been a number of engagements that we've had with the immediate abutters, and then also with the neighborhood at large. I think Tom, correct me, 3 or 4 meetings that we've had in that area to answer concerns and modify our plans here. And then I'd like to just turn it over to Tom quickly to talk about some of the areas that we're looking at for approval from this board, which would be the height and the parking. Tom?
Yeah, we have height and parking. Courtney, can we spend 90 seconds on height, just as an introduction?
Sure. So the basic overview on height is that we are generally meeting our 35 feet from average grade on most sides of the building. And that's primarily because we have so many gabled forms. So we are very close on most of these. Where we do have kind of a height, where we're over the height limit, is on the north side of the building, where the grade drops off towards the river. In that zone, we have a theater back here, which is a flat roof form, which is approximately 10 feet, just under 10 feet over the 35-foot average grade on this side of the building. And other items are things like a cupola, which is unoccupied space that is above that zone as well.
So we'll be coming back, I think in December, to talk more specifically about height. And I will briefly introduce parking. Today we have 204 spaces on campus. We propose a future, which is 204 spaces, although we'd like to propose that we reduce the number of on-campus spaces and utilize some Main Street parking to achieve those numbers. We are going to be able to achieve more green space and reduce impervious surface through doing that. We are also proposing reserve parking for the future, which can accommodate any of those reduced spaces if needed. So we will be working with town staff, Elizabeth and group next week to go through detailed number analysis and make sure everybody agrees with our number assumptions, and then we will bring that back to this board in our next meeting. And Don, anything that we've missed? I think that's the high level introduction.
I think one thing I should talk about is what's inside this Centennial Arts Center building. So we currently have an auditorium that seats 400 students or 400 people. We want to have a playhouse or a theater in this Centennial Arts Center that seats about 175 seats. There's also going to be a music recital hall specifically designed for that craft, and that will seat about 125. And the rest of this area, for the most part, is support spaces, music practice rooms, shops, etc.
That's great. Anything else, or is that?
That's all I have at the moment.
That's great. I think that was a great high-level overview.
Can I just make an observation?
Sure.
And it's only this. I actually just saw a recent quote that I think it's the greatest thing I've ever heard, which is, it said that in the plural of anecdote is not data. But anecdotally, I was driving down Main Street the other day, and I have several different times, and I reflected on various times of the day of how many cars were parked in so many places there. So that's an anecdote, it's not data, but I'll be very curious as to understand the data, because my eye doesn't see where you're going to put this extra spots on Main Street.
I'll go further than you, Jim. I have the same thought, since I went to Concord Academy and drove a car there, and it was always hard to park. So I'm not saying anything other than I'll be interested as well to see your presentation.
We'll be sure to come back with data.
Right.
Could I comment as well? I note that there were 3 or 4 special permits granted in the past. I think 3 of them did relate to parking. So as you do your discussion and your analysis, could you include those in your thoughts and comments?
Yes, we're well aware of those. And so that's a conversation we've had with Elizabeth and some other folks within town staff about trying to document and show that in a form that's easily digestible for you.
That's great. Thank you so much. Elizabeth, do I have to open a public comment, or can I hold off till our next?
You can hold off till your next meeting.
Let's hold off then. And
so do we need but do we need a motion to continue, right?
We do. We need a motion to continue. So that would be December.
So move to December 8th at 7 o'clock, it sounds like.
Great.
Second.
Okay, great. All in favor, Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Kindermans?
Aye.
Ms. Akers-Moore? Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Good December.
Thank you.
Well, just a small little application next. The Concord Public Schools.
Hi, good evening.
Sorry, if you could just introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Stephen Ventresca. I'm with Niche Engineering. civil engineer for the project. And then with me as well is Lorraine Finnegan. She is with SMMA. She's architect. We have Jennifer Susi, also with SMMA. She's also architect on this project. And then we have Mike Dowhan, who's the landscape architect also with SMMA. So we'll go through, we'd like just to give you an overview of the project. I'm just going to start out introductions, and then we'll go to Mike to talk about the site. I'll jump in and talk about stormwater and utilities, which is an important part of this project, considering that we're in the overlay district for groundwater. And then Jen will finish up with the school building, which I know is important, and the aspects of the building and how it fits in with the site. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and start. Okay. Switch this. Okay, I think we see just the main screen here, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Concord Middle School. So this is at 835 Old Marlborough Road in Concord. And as I mentioned, we are going to talk about, excuse me. So here's the agenda, introductions. We're looking for relief on 3 items, looking at parking, impervious area, and the building height. And as I stated before, impervious area is greater than the 15% for the groundwater overlay district. And then in parking, Mike will get into that for a little bit. And then Jen, as I mentioned, will get into the building height. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mike, talk about the site and landscape design, and then we'll pick it up with utilities.
Great. Thanks, Steve. So in the interest of time, what I'll do is I'll give a quick overview of the existing site and a little bit about the proposed design. I want to stick mainly to the elements that we're looking for relief for tonight. And then if there are additional questions about the project, maybe we handle it that way just to keep everything moving. So everyone's aware of the existing property, the Sanborn School on Old Marlborough Road, where it sits on the property adjacent to the existing fields to the sort of southwest to it. And then of course we have the wooded sloped woodland that heads down towards the southeast, and then the lower fields. And of course, there's a resource area to the east over by the lower fields. I'll note right now that we're not touching the lower fields. We're not within the resource area or the buffer zone of the resource area. So none of that stuff is being touched as part of this project. Go ahead, Steve. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to start with the relief from the parking requirements for section 7.7.2. You've probably all seen Elizabeth's recommendations from the planning board. I just excerpted some of those elements here for a quick reference. 165 spaces are required by code. We are providing 150 spaces. We're providing 150 spaces simply because the administration has determined that 125 total employees will be at this school. 116 full-time, 9 part-time. So 150 total parking spaces. You can see 5 of them are accessible. 6 are for the special education vans. And then right now we're providing at least 6 for visitors. So this is, the EV spaces are of course for the faculty and staff. So we sort of like to keep those as part of the faculty and staff total. So at a total of 125 employees, and 165 total parking spaces, required 150 proposed. We think that we probably have about 15 more parking spaces than what we need. We're interested in keeping it right about here, less than what we require, for a couple of reasons. One is to try to minimize and mitigate as best we can the relief that we're asking for in the next section. For the groundwater overlay district, we're trying to minimize as much impervious as we can. And also because it just simply doesn't make a lot of sense to add more hardscape, more impervious area, and put a greater burden on the stormwater infrastructure here. So we feel like this is the right number, and it's been vetted, as you know, with the planning board. And you can see sort of the comments that we have here on the left. Steve, if you want to jump to the next one, please. So then section 7.6, groundwater conservancy district, we're also asking for relief here. There's a 15% maximum requirement for impervious area. The current project is at 16.3%. And I wanted to just show this quick. This is the proposed site plan, of course. So that includes all the parking, hardscape roof, any kind of impervious areas that are on the site, pads for the utility infrastructure, everything. We've counted everything. Thanks. So we're at about 16.3%. And then just really quick, while I'm on this plan, you can sort of hopefully get a flavor of what the proposed building is. So where the existing building is over by where number 4 is. That will be the new athletic facilities. The vast majority of the area where the existing athletic facilities is will now be parking and vehicle infrastructure, bus drop-off, parent drop-off, intertwined and interspersed with surface bioretention areas and stormwater management. The new building is actually sort of 2 separate buildings with sort of a bridge element that connects. I'm probably not explaining it as well as the architects could, but and then it sits and rests gently within that existing slope and within the trees, so that it creates the character of especially the classroom wing, which is the wing on the right, sort of creates a character of a learning environment tucked into the treetops. All the parking, I should say this too, all the parking you can see in vehicular infrastructure all sits in front of the public, so to speak, part of the building, where the gym, the auditorium, cafeteria, all the parking and hardscape sits in front of that building. The classroom wing, where the students will be congregating daily, is surrounded as much as possible by just open space, trees, vegetation, open fields. And that's that was a conscious decision on the part of the design team. I'm going to hand it over to Steve. He's going to talk a little bit more now about the elements that we're doing to mitigate our impact on the groundwater conservancy district relative to utilities and drainage.
So as Mike has taken you through the site, we're just going to give an idea of what we're doing for stormwater. Understanding we are in the groundwater conservancy district, we do understand the importance of recharge, water quality. We've had discussions with the different town boards, CPW, Allen, Water Department, et cetera, DPW and town engineer. And as you just want to again point out, everything's oriented the same way. We have the existing Sanborn school here, and then the new school down here south of the page. And the proposal for stormwater, which is the most critical, is using LID approach or low impact development. And so the plan is for this project is to sheet flow water off of paved areas, which are shown here in the white, and then to sheet them into these bioretention systems, which are these green areas here. And that'll provide the initial water quality that we're looking for this site. After going through the bioretention, where the stormwater is treated, that first flush, we like to call that that water quality storm. In this case, it's the first inch of stormwater that falls on the site, gets treated through in the impervious area, gets treated through the bioretentions, the plants and the soils in the bioretention. Then the water then overflows and goes into this larger rectangular area, which is chamber systems. If you're familiar with it, it's those plastic chambers, capture stormwater, provide additional water quality through proprietary treatment called an isolator row, and then infiltration, which then provides an additional water quality unit, and then beneficial infiltration because of the Jenny Dugan well, which is just south of the school here, and it's just off the page. It's actually down here. So we're providing substantial recharge from the existing school infrastructure and providing substantial water quality treatment, where the existing school is providing essentially zero water quality treatment and infiltration. To further the water quality, the school is on a septic system. We're removing that septic system as part of the demolition of this school, and we're providing a new field, which is shown here in orange. And what we need to do is pump the effluent from the new school, the tanks are located here in the loading dock area, and we're also providing a denitrification system to further improve the effluent before it gets pumped up to the septic field here and then infiltrates into the ground. We're in the process with the Board of Health for plan acceptance for the septic system. We are seeking, or we have received approval from DEP because we are doing a reduced flow variance based on a school, which allows us to provide a lower flow for the school based on water consumption of similar schools to provide a more efficient system for the septic field. We're also providing connections for water, fire protection separate from the water service, which is here. And the fire protection is shown here to feed the hydrants and feed the sprinkler system in the school. We are providing one gas line, and that's going to the emergency generator, which is required. And that'll, of course, run systems in the school as outlined in the agreement between the town and the school for what's necessary to run the school during an emergency power outage. At this point, I'm going to then, speaking of the building, we'll hand it over to Jen. She can talk about the building design and the request of relief for the height.
Sure. I'll just give a general overview of the building design, which ahead of discussing the building height, I think that will help inform our request for relief for that. So what you're looking at right now is the ground floor plan. You can see identified in the center is the main entrance of the building. So what's important to note is that we're entering at the main entrance of the building, actually what we're calling the ground floor, which is technically the second floor of the building. Given the topography of the site, which is pretty aggressive from the north to the south of the building, we're actually entering at the second floor level. So to the left, you're seeing the public wing, which is the administration media center. We have a 420-seat auditorium, and then the blue block that you see to the west is the gymnasium. So essentially, for all intents and purposes, the building is kind of two separate volumes. To the right is the classroom administration, the classroom block, and that's a 3-story wing. The public block to the left is 2 stories. So if you go to the next slide, we'll start to show some images. So the perspective you see on the bottom is actually from Old Marlborough Road, the north side of the building. So to the right, you see the auditorium administration block. And then there's a bridge element that connects to the 3-story volume classroom wing, which you'll see there. And then on the top, you can see an elevation view, and you can see how the topography drops off as you go to the east. Next slide. The next view is from the back of the building. So you can see the 3-story volume of the classroom wing on the right, and then you can see how the grade starts to aggressively move up as you go to the public wing, which you see on the left. And you can see how but you can also see here too, to the south of the site, there's heavily wooded area, which helps to screen the larger volumes as we're going down the site as the topography grades down. Next slide. This is a view of the main entrance as you're entering into the building at the second floor level. I think of note here is on the left, you can see the classroom wing, and you can actually see from this elevation, you're really only seeing 2 stories of the building. There's actually a lower floor level that drops down. So you're really only visibly seeing the ground floor and the upper floor level. And then I will make note of, you'll see a stair tower to the left of the main entrance. That actually is the tallest, that's the highest point of the building, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Next slide. This is just another view of the main entrance. You can see the bridge element, and you can see the grades as they're going down towards the back of the site, and how we're sort of taking advantage of that and creating sort of an amphitheater space. And then this is the back of the building, some outdoor classroom space, again, on the back side where we do have the tall building heights. It's surrounded by, you know, heavily wooded areas. And then this slide here just is talking more about the calculations of how we got to the building height. And as you know, the calculation of building height is based on the lowest, at the average of the lowest point of foundation. So you can see we've overlaid the new building over the existing grades, which per the calculations sets us at the base elevation at 180 foot 3 inches. So just in perspective, as I was talking about before, as we're entering in to the building at ground level on the front of the building, that's actually at 197. And then the lower floor level of the classroom wing is actually at 183. So our base elevation is even lower than our slab elevation for our lower floor level. So also one item that I wanted to note is that our, you know, the average road elevation along Old Marlborough Road is an elevation of 201. So essentially from Old Marlborough Road, the stair tower height, although as it's calculated to be 58 foot 2.5 inches, just perceives from Old Marlborough Road, that stair tower, which is the blue highlighted, just that small square in the center there, is actually at 37 foot 5.5. That's sort of the perceived elevation. The academic wing, which is the wing to the right, is the elevation as calculated. The height, building height, is 47 foot 6.5, but perceived from the road is only 26 foot 9.5. So we're
Jen, could I ask you a question? Is that because of the drop down of the land toward the backside?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, it's
okay.
Yep, it's just the topography of the site, and we're sort of taking advantage of that and creating a 3-story wing right at that position in the site where it drops down.
And with that, that's our presentation for the Concord Middle School. We're welcome any questions that you might have and hope to clarify anything, any additional comments or questions that you have.
That's great. Thank you very much. That was very helpful. I just have to say, and I said this to Elizabeth earlier, I'm very impressed knowing how much work went into this and how many back and forth that we get this lovely comprehensive letter written by Elizabeth that really lays everything out very clearly. And I'm grateful that we have it. So thank you, Elizabeth. Questions from the board?
I was just curious why the stormwater report referred to this as a new development instead of a brownfield, instead of a redevelopment.
Because the stormwater, the regulations for stormwater, if you increase impervious area, and we are increasing it by several acres, it is categorized as a new development and not as a redevelopment. Okay.
And then my other sort of, immaterial question, I saw cited that there were going to be 240 new trees planted. Do we have a number of kind of a net number versus what has to be removed? I think there was 4 acres being cleared.
I don't have a net number. I will say that you're right. There are 4 acres being cleared. I don't know what the exact number of trees that are in that 4 acres. I apologize. I don't have that number.
Yeah, but just generally speaking, do you have a sense of the balance or?
If I'm being honest, I think there's a small deficit. I think there's definitely a deficit. Everything that we are replanting, all the proposed vegetation that is going to be replanted is all going to be native species, and not just native, but I mean like native to, not just native to the Northeast, but I mean native to this sort of microclimate that we're creating here, both canopy and understory and ground plane treatments. There's no irrigation out here, so we're very careful to make sure that we use trees and plant material that are perfectly suited to this macro and microclimate.
Okay. Thanks. That's helpful.
What happens to the field that is now behind that school, the current school that is adjacent to the rail trail pathway?
We're not touching it, sir.
Okay. So from the edge of that field up towards the new school, that forested area, a lot of that will continue to stay in place then?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
I have a stormwater question. DEP requires you to meet certain standards, volumes, etc. of infiltration.
Correct.
How much above and beyond have you gone in this development, in this proposal?
Yeah, so there's a couple of metrics that we're required to meet. One is volume or infiltration of a particular volume, and I'd mentioned the 1-inch storm, which is the minimum that you're required to infiltrate, and that's over the impervious area that you're developing. Based on the state requirements, that we're required to infiltrate 11,000 cubic feet of stormwater. What we're providing is 3 times that volume, about 32,000 cubic feet. So we're substantially increasing recharge from what's required, the minimum that's required by the state. I should also point out that we're using a higher storm volume. The regulations allow us to use what's called the TP40, so it's a lower 24-hour storm. We've gone to the Atlas 14 storm, which means we're providing recharge for higher volume storms in anticipation of climate change, which is already here. And as you know, the current school does not have or is very little mitigation for stormwater quality and quantity. So we're substantially increasing what's there currently, and we're above and beyond what's required as a minimum for water quality and infiltration. I will say we did meet with CPW, the Concord Public Works, on September 14th. We reviewed our stormwater plans with them. We adjusted it based on some of their comments that we've had to provide additional water quality treatment. And they provided a favorable recommendation to proceed with the increased impervious area based on the adjustments that we made when we met with them.
Thank you.
I'm going to comment, say one thing that Elizabeth said. Elizabeth Hughes, this is just really terrific job. Both I think the planning board recommendation, but also your report with the yellow highlighting, which I read both, but the yellow highlighting just helps in a situation like this for finding things. So I really appreciate that. I'd like to comment on 2 things, I think. One is that I gathered, and I just want to check to see I'm right, that part of the fact that you've got a 3-story classroom wing here and 2 stories in the other room, main building and so forth, actually, although it adds to your height issue, there's an interaction with that and the impervious nature, right? I mean, am I getting that right? That if you were to knock down the height, you have room in your site to have a more sprawling building, presumably, but that would actually go against the impervious question that we're talking about. Is that a fair statement, or is that too simplistic?
That's a fair statement.
Very fair.
And the second is that there's reference in some of this to, I guess what's referred to the future installation of solar canopies over the parking areas. And I wasn't sure that I understand. I mean, I understand what you mean, but I was just not sure that I understood that or how it's being addressed or whether or not we have to address it in this permit. It just was unclear to me how that factors into the discussion.
So you do not need to address that in this application or this discussion. It was brought up through the conversations the consultant team had with town staff, and then during the planning board's discussion, because there will be a slight increase in the impervious coverage because of the solar canopies. They will be going over most of the parking lot area. And so we were trying to figure out a way of incorporating that additional impervious coverage into this application so that when the time came that CMLP will be doing the solar on the roof and the canopies in the parking lot as a separate project. So we were trying to see if there was a way to incorporate that impervious coverage, which will go from 16.3 to possibly 17.2 or maybe even less. It won't be more, but it could be even less. And it just got into a very challenging way of trying to include that impervious coverage, but not the whole entire project, because they're not at that point yet with final design and those issues, and they will be different contracts, and so it just became too challenging to try to incorporate it. So in speaking with the CMLP superintendent, he is aware that they will have to go through a permitting process for the solar canopies, and at that point they will come back to the board to amend the special permit to do that slight increase in the impervious coverage. And at that point, town staff will make sure that the stormwater drainage calculations and everything work, the design works, and so the board will see this in the future.
And I guess I'll just ask one other thing. I'll just make a statement first. I mean, this is a really tremendous, it's a tremendous report. Seems to be a tremendous use of the site. I had children who went to Peabody, not Sanborn, but you spent a lot of time at Sanborn in any case. And I think this is a great use of this site. And I really applaud the design and what's going on here. The only other last question I have is I am persuaded by the parking relief request without any question, but I just would note that there is no other place to park. If you're not on site, there's really no other place for anyone to park. So if you could just comment on, what consideration you gave to either what the tolerance is on with this, what happens if there's, the school gets much larger in terms of number of kids, and so therefore there's more staff. I mean, just sort of what the tolerances were on the discussion on parking.
Is that a question for me?
That was a question. It was a question for the consultants or the staff here. I think you've made a very persuasive argument about the need for the parking and what the right number is and the imperviousness and so forth. I'm just trying to understand how much you stress tested that in terms of your need for parking itself.
Well, I'll say that the school, I know the school is designed for 700 students. I think I would prefer to let Jen Susi discuss anything about how the school could expand over time. We do have some buffer, as you know, we mentioned, we've built some buffer, a small amount of buffer into the parking, about 15 extra spaces above and beyond what they need today. So there is a small buffer there, but your observation is accurate. But a lot of that is by design. We're making a very conscious effort for this net zero, building this net zero site. We're making a very conscious effort not to add any more impervious area that we have to, and to really try to create an infrastructure here that is as sensitive and green, right, as possible.
Elizabeth, can you just, given what went on at CCHS with the parking there, can you just give us a little insight into the discussions that were had amongst everyone in the planning board about that, about Jim's question?
So the planning board did not compare this site to what happened at the high school. It's a little bit of a different situation given the fact that there are students that are allowed to drive to the school. There's students that aren't allowed to park to this at the high school, but obviously they have cars and can drive, and that's why you get the spillover into the side streets. So that isn't something you'd see here. I think to Jim's point, what will happen should the school enrollment is trending down, and there is no indication that school enrollment is going to trend up. But to Jim's point, the town may see a very large 40B, and that will increase the student population or some measure. What would happen is that there would have to be a reevaluation of the site as far as where could you then start to add a space, couple spaces here, couple spaces there, and each time they would have to come back, amend the special permit to increase the impervious coverage, and would have to make offsets and mitigations for that impervious coverage to continue to protect the town's adjacent well.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm mindful that there is concern whether the current budget can handle the project that has just been described to us. If indeed the town, for whatever reason, said, hey, we can't build this facility as shown, so there need to be some cutbacks. Would that impact our approval if the project became smaller? Would they have to come back to us? I don't think so, but would they have to come back to us?
It would depend on what got smaller. If just the building itself were to get smaller, and it did not affect any utilities or parking or stormwater drainage or those items, and just physically the building looked the same but all of a sudden just became smaller, likely no. Each decision that the board issues, there is some ability on the part of the building commissioner to find something in substantial conformance with the decision. We have done this with homes where a home actually did get smaller, but it basically looked exactly the same. And no, we would not have that come back. There have been cases where, and it does happen mostly with commercial projects, and it could happen with this project, where an element changes and let's say the building got smaller, but some element changed where the building commissioner and I were not comfortable at a staff level to make that determination. We can send it back to the board for administrative approval, where it's not a full legal notice in the paper, 2 consecutive weeks and notification of abutters and an actual formal filing. And but it does come back to at least have the board's input and the board making that determination on substantial conformance. And then there's some projects where stormwater changed, parking layout changed, those types, that would be a refiling for an amendment to the special permit.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if that's, let's go ahead and open a public comment. We can come back to the board. Does anyone have a public comment? I am looking, I am not seeing anyone.
Oh, you have.
Go ahead, Pamela Dritt.
I just want to encourage you to.
Can you just say your name and your address? Okay.
Sorry, Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4. I think I would like to encourage you, especially in cases like this, to go ahead and make exceptions to the height requirements, which seem to be arbitrary. For shouldn't we rather go up than out? We can protect our green life better this way.
Great.
That's all.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yes.
Who do you?
Jane Huber.
You have your hand up. Sorry,
Yes.
I did not see that.
It's hard to see on the background.
Oh yeah, now I see it. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
We should go ahead.
Yeah, just introduce yourself and give your address.
Yeah, I'm Jane Huber. I live at 38 Williams Road. I was wondering if you could indicate where the current septic or leach field is for the current middle school compared to, I think it was on slide 8 where we saw
Sure. So you can see the existing school here outlined in this light gray.
You have to share your screen.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Yep.
Okay. So the existing schools, Old Marlborough Road is here. The existing Sanborn School is this light gray image here. And so the existing septic field is right here. It's these two rectangles that are just outlined. This is the existing septic field. And so what we did is we are putting, because of the phasing and construction that we need to do, we're putting the new leaching field next to the existing leaching fields. In that way, it also provides some protection to the well, which is down here, because there was a groundwater study that was done in the early 2000s that shows that the approximate break of the groundwater flow is about this, is about here. The divide is about here. So water that gets into the ground flows out this way, which is away from the well, and then water that falls in this part of the site flows towards the well after going through the wetland. So we decided, after consultation with CPW and the Board of Health, that this was the best location for the project, just for the well protection and understanding where the groundwater flows are.
Understood. Can I can bring it up on my screen, but if someone can, so in all of the schemas, unfortunately, it omits some of the abutters. So just so you folks know, right below that septic is our well. So
is this your property down here?
It is.
Okay.
And I have we have a 100-year-old dug well that's a source of water for 3 families. And it's very clean. We keep it very clean, but I wouldn't want to have the leaching field or septic any closer to our well. So while I understand the sequencing makes sense, it doesn't for the, and as you all know, also there's an incredibly steep incline right behind that. So getting closer to that incline, unless there's some other plans in place, which I would love to hear about from the site folks in terms of, I don't know if there's a plan to put a berm or some other thing that would slow water across this rundown, but that runs right back into our well.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, just that,
yes,
in working with, so we are in compliance with requirements for Title V and separation of leach fields to property lines. We are providing a denitrification system to further treat the effluent, which wasn't the case for the existing leach field. And we also are providing additional tanks within, as part of the septic layout to provide further removal and settling of solids before it goes into the denitrification system. So we are improving the quality of the effluent before it's being discharged into the ground. We have had this reviewed by DEP, and they have, they've approved what we've asked for as far as a flow variance.
The Department of
Environmental Protection, correct?
Right, but if we were, so we assume this was the right venue to raise this because
it's interesting. Actually, I would say I'm surprised that this is coming up at this late stage, Elizabeth.
It has come up repeatedly, actually.
Oh, okay. So I don't know the background of that.
Yeah. So we've attended many of the things and talked about concerns about this, and we've been to the Board of Health, and they have suggested we should also write a letter, and we're happy to do that. But this has been a conversation that's ongoing. I just don't know why. Yeah. So this is the first time we've seen the placement of the tank. We didn't go the last public showing, but we've gone to all the others. And I would just say, we're delighted at the care that's been taken with this project, and we're very happy that that they've taken care not to encroach on people on Captain Miles, and it's very good that we're not going to worry. We're going to try to be very careful of the other well, but there are other people who don't have access to public water, and it would be a shame for the process to end up creating problems with our water source.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, let's discuss that more after. Well, Elizabeth, do you want to address that now? The procedure that's gone through.
I'm not sure I can necessarily address it because it deals specifically with a Title V, Title V requirements, but I do want to ask. So this is the
that's my house right there. So
yep, right, so these yep. So these three, and
my well is
the well
is, if you move your cursor up towards that back building, do you see
this
it?
one?
Yep. Now move. It's about 20 feet in front of that space, a little to the left.
Okay. So somewhere in this area.
A little, yeah, close to that, close to this other little area, and okay. we've spent.
Oh,
no, it's quite all right. Go ahead.
And then. Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, up in this area is where the new leach field is proposed to go, correct?
That's correct. It's actually starting at that tree line that you see at the edge,
right here.
Starting there and then taking out that little piece. Does it go? It doesn't go that far, but yeah, approximately.
No, I think it doesn't. I don't think it extends past the back of the building. I think
it doesn't, and it's actually about 10 or so feet.
So this is where, and I don't have that information, but to Steve's point, the groundwater study, the divide line goes somewhere in this location, and I believe that that the well on this property is on this side of the divide line, and the leach field was specifically placed here to be on the opposite side of the divide line.
Correct. It'd be great to see where the divide line is. We actually haven't seen any of that information.
Right. Sorry, let me ask you, Elizabeth, the question. Is this a Board of Health issue, Department of Health?
So if this would have been something as far as the it would have been something part of the Board of Health process and the variance process that was done for the groundwater conservancy district. That's under this board's purview. The special permit is dealing with the impervious coverage and the impact on the well. But I would have, during the Public Works Commission, when they were discussing the project, that it could have been discussed at that point as well.
Going forward, if they went back, if they were interested in seeing this going over to Public Works or going over to the Department of Health?
Steve, do you know which report that was? Was that for the school project specifically, or was it
the groundwater?
Yes.
Yeah, so that was part of initial discussions that we had with the Board of Health, and that was also part of the Board of Health filing that with DEP that we provided them that information. We did also provide it to CPW, so it's gone to both departments.
That's great. I just don't know where the public component is for us.
Yeah.
Where were the public? Where was the moment for public comment? So we've gone to all the middle school things, and then there was this, and we saw it was about water, and so we thought that this was the appropriate venue. We're happy to go someplace else.
I'm trying to get you to the right place, because I think we're not.
And I'm trying to one, see if I can get you that information in a much faster time frame, because after this process, the process with the Board of Health already happened. The process with DEP already happened. The Public Works Commission, already provided their comment letter. I was not aware of this as far as when this was going through the planning board process. It wasn't a comment made to me, but at this point in time, I will be back in the office on Monday, and I will find where that information is. And if you want to send me an email so that I have your contact information, then when I find it, I'm also I know a little bit about a lot of things, and I know that Title V specifically talks to setbacks from at least from public water supplies. And I don't know the information as far as private water supplies, but that I can find out on Monday from the health director. And
we did talk to the Board of Health as well. So, but what we keep hearing is be sure that you go to these public things and you raise this. So we're really trying to figure out where the appropriate place is, and it worries us. But more importantly, is it's related to the for this group is the question about the impervious surface. It seems fine, and I'm actually thoroughly agnostic on parking. It'd be good if people in Concord wanted to carpool more, so I'm great with that. But it is true that if one of the arguments made, which increased the budget much earlier, was that we were going to have a larger auditorium. There was a big push for a bigger auditorium and bigger gymnasiums. And if we're going to have people come to those auditoriums, if they're going to be performances or one of the things that people talk about repeatedly, like graduations, we're going to have to make allowances for where people would park. From our perspective, the less impervious surface there is, the better. But there seems to be some obvious. My comment would be, our comment is that it seems like there's some obvious choices to be made. If the town wants to preserve the water, we can't have as many parking spaces, and that may mean that it doesn't make sense for us to have gathering spaces for the community as they were built that people can't go to because they can't park there. So there's embedded in this an obvious way of reducing the financial drains.
Got it.
So yeah, Elizabeth, I can tell you that specifically. I mean, I cannot speak to the larger auditorium and the discussions that went into that, but I can tell you the planning board did specifically ask about the larger events, and specifically worked with the applicant and got input from the fire department that so currently there's 150 parking spaces, and then during larger events, the two designated areas for bus parking, the buses won't be there during larger events, so that parking could happen in those bus areas. That would bring the total available parking to just above 170. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. Is it 174?
183, Elizabeth.
Oh, 183. Even I was off. So that was something that the planning board did specifically address, because they tried, and this is why there's also now the parent pickup drop-off queuing in the lower parking lot. It was a concern brought up by Public Works Engineering and myself about the queuing on Old Marlborough Road, and also parking on Old Marlborough Road. So hopefully going 183 spaces for larger events. But As far as the parking number, that's set based on the zoning bylaw.
Okay, yeah, and we are going to discuss that obviously when we get to our discussion. So I would say, Elizabeth, you could follow up with the answer about the delineation lines and everything. That would be very helpful. And you will get, Elizabeth, your contact information. I'm pointing at you as if you could see me, but
no, it's fine. And the only other thing I was going to say was this is one of those moments where this is just as a taxpayer, is that we have situations where people are asking for two separate things that are sometimes, if not mutually exclusive, difficult to meet. So the same people who may want this space are also going to want more parking. And I'd also like to point out that we opted for impervious coverage on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So that entire area, which abuts the lower field and is part of the wetlands area that we're talking about. And if we wanted impervious area there, then we're not going to have as much, in other areas in the watershed. So,
okay. Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Anyone else? I think everyone else here is part of the applicant team or the ZBA. So I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. This is obviously a huge application. It's obviously been through many different reviews by many different people. To me, we're looking at these very few issues. I think parking is always tricky. I think the idea of minimizing impervious, that balancing act seems to have been something that everyone took into consideration and really tried to figure out the best way to deal with parking. I will point out there's fewer parking spaces between both buildings now. Is that right? Sanborn and PBD combined than there will be on this one site, which is just kind of an interesting number for me to hear. The height, I think, was very helpful for you to use perceived height and versus what the technical heights are. Doesn't bug me. The height, I think it's not offensive in how tall it is. I think, would you say 37 feet is the perceived for the tallest for the stair tower? And then what am I forgetting? Parking, impervious.
That's it.
All right, great. Let me any other comments from the board? I mean, I really do applaud all the work that's gone into this. I can't imagine. I'm going to say herding cats, but there's probably something better to say than that. Jim, Tom, Theo, Robbie, anything else, or does someone want to make a motion?
What I was going to say was that I agree with everything you said, and I actually read pretty thoroughly the planning board recommendation, and I'm trying to listen to everything we said here tonight. I don't think there's really anything to add to that recommendation. Am I? So, I mean, is it possible? I'm just trying to think from a motion standpoint, if we can simply adopt it. I mean, I understand including all of the various conditions and so forth and so on. Yes.
What would be the difference between adopting it and just saying,
well,
including all the conditions and the?
I sort of, that was a shorthand way of saying we don't have to.
Oh, make all the findings that we find.
Yes.
That the planning board has.
You can adopt the planning board recommendation as your findings for approval.
I love
that.
Yes,
that's what I was. Yes, that's what I was trying to get for.
Okay,
so
great.
I'm happy to make that motion.
And I can second that.
Yeah. So I'll say it slightly larger, just for the record, that I would move that we approve the special permit under sections 4.3.1, 6.2.11, 7.6, 7.7, and 11.6 of the zoning bylaw to demolish the existing Sanborn Middle School, construct a new middle school, which includes a height waiver, relief from parking, impervious coverage greater than 15% in the groundwater conservancy district, all at 835 Old Marlborough Road. And in doing so, that we adopt the findings of the planning board in their recommendation and agree and approve all of the conditions set forth in that report.
Second.
Great. All in favor, Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Kindermans?
Aye.
Ms. Akersmore? Aye. It's funny. I feel like we did the least amount of work, but we were so important at the end. It's very exciting. So I'm very excited about the project and for being able to vote for it. So thank you all.
Thank you.
And good luck on everything that's going to come after this, which is probably not going to be as easy, to be honest. But
thank you very much. And thank Elizabeth and her staff and town for working with us on this project. It's been a great experience. So thank you.
Oh, that's good. Glad to hear it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. All right, moving on to our final. I've lost this in the Stephen and Heather Fredette.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you for sitting through all of that.
Thank you. Of course, my name is Ben Minix with Eaglebrook Engineering on behalf of the applicants, Stephen and Heather Fredette, also for Dan Gordon, Landscape Architects, and LEC Environmental. I don't believe anyone else is on the call, so I should be here to answer all the questions. No proposed school for this one. Sorry to disappoint.
But a PRD subdivision, anything? No.
Not today.
All right. That's good.
So if I could share my screen just to go through the project. Okay, you should be able to see our site plan. So we are proposing work within the floodplain conservancy district. The applicants are constructing a swimming pool in this area here and some other landscaping improvements. We've gone through a notice of intent application with the Natural Resource Commission that has been approved. But the work before you in the floodplain is concerning, there's an existing deck in this area here. We're proposing to shorten that area and construct a retaining wall and basically a new raised walkway with stairs in place of the deck. So I will show see if I can try and share this picture here. So this is a view from the back of the house. This is the deck and the retaining wall, and new walkway will be in place of the deck. Same dimension off the face of the house. So what we have done is design the site grading so that there is no loss of flood storage and at a ratio of 1.5 to 1, we're increasing flood storage actually greater than that, 200 cubic feet above that 1.5 ratio. So that's pretty much it. Floodplain is at elevation 121, and if you can follow my cursor, it's approximately through here, goes under the deck, and then comes back around here. So most of the project is outside the floodplain conservancy district.
Yep.
Happy to answer any questions or go.
Ayo, any questions? I feel like this is, go ahead.
So where are you doing the regrading for this?
So let me, can you see my my site plan again?
No, we're still with the photo.
Okay. This one. Okay. I might be able to see a little bit easier on this one. So the walkway and deck or retaining wall are here. Elevation 121 is the floodplain elevation. So everything to the left of that is lower. So floodplain storage, that goes underneath the deck. So the retaining wall actually reduces the amount of floodplain storage provided in that area because right now the deck is open underneath. So once we close that area off, you lose storage underneath the deck. So we are providing additional storage by regrading over here around where these fruit bushes are and these planters. So all in this area. And then we're actually removing some of the walkway over here to provide more storage. So it's a pretty small area. And I believe Elizabeth confirmed in the planning board meeting that engineering did review our calculations and said they were acceptable.
Okay, any follow-up?
No, that's it. I mean, I didn't review calculations, but I trust that the engineering did.
And other comments from the board?
And we have just a note for the record, we have another planning board recommendation for this one, right?
We do.
Yes.
So
Right.
we potentially could do the same thing that we did in the last one at a double.
Well, I was equally impressed with that one. So
right.
Shorter, but no
right.
less clear.
You can do the same thing.
Well, let's if there are no other, let me go ahead and open to public comment, see if we got anything. Is anyone still here? Anyone awake still? Is there anything, Elizabeth? I don't see anything. No. Okay, great. I'm going to close public comment. I don't have anything to add. I'm content that the proper people have looked at this carefully and that they are satisfied with it.
So I'm going to move that we grant a special permit to Stephen and Heather Fredette under section 7.2, 11.6 of the zoning bylaw to construct a retaining wall and perform landscape improvements which require a 224 cubic foot, I guess it is, a fill within the floodplain conservancy district and 533 cubic feet of compensatory flood storage at 286 Barrett's Mill Road, and for findings to adopt the report and recommendation of the planning board.
I will second that motion.
And any conditions set forth there, and all, don't think there were that many conditions, so.
That's great. All in favor, Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Kindermans?
Aye.
Ms. Akers-Moore? Aye. Thank you very much. That's what you want to be, is at the end of a 2-hour long meeting where we're all ready to go home. Thank you. Great. So now we just have the 10-13 minutes. I did not have any comments. I read them. Anyone else have any comments?
I had a comment, and I think that was addressed by Haley. So
yep, those were incorporated.
Great. Should we anyone want to make a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Mr. Smith?
Okay. Aye.
Mr. Kindermans?
Aye.
Ms. Akers-Moore? Aye. Is that it?
Wow. You guys are
well. I didn't really want to miss the last meeting, having for the reason I did, which is I had COVID, but I can't say that I'm happy I missed the last meeting. That's all.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim.